One of the stallholders at Agfair 2024 was Jaddan Bruhn, who was selling Broken Hill and Silverton greeting cards and gifts using his original photography and artworks and archival images. Jaddan says his works are inspired by the landscape, buildings, textures and people of Broken Hill, in particular the unique building materials and finishes in use around the town throughout its history. He likes to explore the idea of time, layering, heritage and reminiscence. Jaddan was born in South Broken Hill and comes from the great Attard family. His great-grandfather Emanual Attard moved to Broken Hill in 1918 and worked at Central Mine. Jaddan lives in Sydney but regularly travels back to Broken Hill. I sat down with Jaddan at Agfair to ask about his family history and his work as a photographer and artist.
It all started out with my greeting cards. That was probably the first thing that I started doing, and that led to coasters and trivets because they're the same kind of shape. And then because of the interest that people had in those sorts of things, I then expanded it to include tea towels and placemats, mouse pads, different sorts of things that give the work that I do a functional use to people, because people used to look at the pictures and they think, yeah, that's really nice, but what am I going to do with it? So I found it more useful to find a way of putting the work on something that people would have a level of engagement with.
Now, you live in Sydney, but you were born in Broken Hill?
Yeah, and I spend quite a lot of time here during the year, and I also have a house here as well. So I spend more and more time here. Every year it seems I'm spending more and more time here. I've got a lot of relatives and family here as well.
Yeah, and I understand you come from the great Attard family in town. Can you tell me a little bit about your family's history in this town?
Well, both of my great-grandfathers came from Malta around a similar time, the late 19-teens and early 1920s. Because I think during the interwar period in Malta, a lot of people were looking for work in other places and looking for other opportunities. And in South Australia during the interwar period, it was illegal for Maltese nationals to be employed. So a lot of them went to regional areas and country areas. So in South Australia, it was illegal for Maltese nationals, to be employed.
Why?
I'm not sure. It was a law at the time.
Was it particular to Maltese people?
Yeah, it was a particular law that was Maltese nationals. Yeah, it was particular to Maltese nationals. And so a lot of Maltese went to regional areas. So there was like Maltese in Port Pirie, there was Maltese, and a lot of Maltese came to Broken Hill. Like quite a lot of Maltese came to Broken Hill. So when I was recently at the Family History Centre under the train station in Crystal Street, they've actually got like a Maltese file because of like the amount of Maltese families that used to live here. Big Maltese connection. Yeah. So one of my great-grandfather Emanual Attard, who came to Broken Hill, he came to Broken Hill initially, and then with the different strikes and things that was happening, he ended up settling in Port Pirie. So my grandfather was born in Port Pirie, and they used to grow vegetables, tomatoes and things like that out there, but then when there'd be a bad crop, they'd come back to Broken Hill and he'd get work on the mine, and then when that was okay again, they'd go back, and so they go back and forth a few times until they finally settled in Broken Hill, I think sometime in the 30s. And then on my grandmother's side, my other great-grandfather, he came to Broken Hill and had a market garden out at Stevens Creek, which is where my grandmother and her two sisters were brought up.
Yeah, Stevens Creek, kind of just on the Sydney Road, isn't it?
Right, it's the one you go past the Our Barn Hotel, the Our Hotel.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't drive, so I've got no idea what street names are.
Okay. So she grew up there. And what about your growing up in Broken Hill? What was that like, and what memories do you have?
So what it was for me was, because my parents had been overseas for a number of years. So my mother used to have a hair salon out the south, and
what was it called?
Miss Marilyn's. Actually, I had to write it down because it was longer than Miss Marilyn's Coiffure and Beauty Salon. It was in Patton Street.
Yeah.
It's next to where the supermarket used to be in Patton Street. It's like a vacant piece of land. If you watch, I think it's Housos, that was filmed here a couple of years ago. Part of one of the Housos episodes was filmed like on this bit of dirt. But anyway, so my parents had been away for a number of years. After they got married, they went to like the UK and Europe, and then they went to Canada, and my older brother was born in Canada, and they came back to Broken Hill and they stayed here for a few years, and my father started working for my grandfather, my uncle at Attard's, and they wanted them to go and stay in Adelaide because Attard's goes between Broken Hill and Adelaide. And so when I was a toddler, I think, my parents moved to Adelaide. So I went to school in Adelaide, but I'd come up here for school holidays. So I've got all of those sorts of memories of, running around, riding bikes with my cousins all over the place, kind of being set free because it's that kind of environment. All those sort of fun, happy memories. Yeah.
And it sounds like there's a bit of a theme in your story of kind of going away and coming back, going away, coming back.
You hear that a lot with people in Broken Hill though. Yeah. A lot of people do that kind of thing, but people always end up coming back. Always end up, the connection's quite a strong one, I think, in most people.
What led you to kind of go to Sydney?
Well, after I finished school in Adelaide, I lived in Melbourne for a number of years. And after living in Melbourne for 8 years, I then moved to Sydney. And then once I'd moved to Sydney, that was kind of about then that I realised that there's a direct train link between Broken Hill and Sydney. Whereas when you're in Melbourne, it's not that. To get to Broken Hill, it would be, because I don't drive again, it would either be go via Adelaide or whatever. I think for a short period of time, Rex had a direct flight between Melbourne and Broken Hill, but I don't think they do it anymore. And they definitely didn't do it when I was staying there. So, one of the good things about being in Sydney was that you've got this direct link.
So in Sydney, you started to kind of develop your business or art, or did it start as art first?
I think that after I'd moved to Sydney, I found that quite a big change, quite a lot to get used to, and I spent, I guess, a bit of time trying to see what it was, see how I felt about the place and how I related best to the place. And it was while I was overseas on a trip that I was drawn to souvenirs and seeing how other people represented where it was that they lived to visitors, to people travelling through.
What did you notice about the representations of Broken Hill in souvenirs at that time? Do you remember?
I think that one of the things that I had noticed was, having been, from Broken Hill originally and coming back and back and back so many times, nothing much had changed. What was available, or what you'd see, was what had always been. Like anything, I also think that from observing different places that people would go, sort of noticing how people I think it was difficult for people who were visiting, and for a lot of people, coming to Broken Hill was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And when people come somewhere, they want something that's going to, remind them of an experience or a connection or something that they've had. And there wasn't really a lot at the time that seemed to me to fulfill that for people. So that was probably, I guess, maybe where I started from. But one of the things that because Broken Hill's got such an amazing history and such a massive archive of images that document that history, that not making those images accessible to people seemed like something that should be done.
So talk to me about some of these images that you've not digitalised, but that you've edited. Why did you choose these ones?
Both of my great-grandfathers had at different times worked as miners. Emanual Attard, when he died in a mining accident in 1947, he was a mulliker on the North Mine. And I thought that something that I wanted to do was to concentrate more on the mining images, to bring some of that to life a little bit more, to help me connect with my own family history and what experiences he would have had, just to get a better understanding of where my family had come from.
What did he die? How did the mining accident happen? Do you know?
There was an incident where I think something hadn't detonated in the previous shifts, and then during his shifts he was drilling into something, and that's when it then detonated and blew up in his face, and it was horrific injuries. And I don't think he died on impact. I think he died the following day in hospital from all the terrible things that had occurred. So there's that book that's available called The Fatal Loads that documents all the deaths of the miners in Broken Hill. And I've read through that, and it's quite a horrific thing he must have gone through.
How old was he when he died?
50.
So still quite young.
Yeah. So when he died, my mother was only 3 months old, and he'd only seen her once. Yeah.
How many kids did he leave behind?
My grandfather and my great aunt. So that was just the two of them.
What did you learn through doing these photos and reconnecting with that part of your family's history?
I think just how extreme the working conditions were, and what I guess a treacherous decision it was, like an extreme decision it was for people to make to work in those sorts of environments. It was so dangerous. It was really, really so dangerous. And it wasn't just hard work, it was dangerous work.
Did you think they knew the danger?
I guess it made me think about what the alternatives might have been for them, and the fact that maybe that was where they ended up because there were no other alternatives.
So after you did these editing of these photos, what else did you do in terms of your souvenirs?
I moved on from that more historical aspect to looking at the different textures around Broken Hill, the different sorts of stoneworks and different iron fencing, how building materials or how buildings are surviving in this kind of environment, which I guess is also having a bit of a historical aspect of how things are changing over time. But just one of the things that strikes me about Broken Hill is no two houses are the same. Like when you walk around, there are no two houses here that everything is different. Everything is a little bit different. And when you look at those sorts of differences, it's so diverse, it's so interesting, and it draws you in. And I think that was one of the things that I was wanting to take a bit more of a closer look at.
What's been the feedback to these souvenirs that you've created?
One ongoing thing that I hear is that people will come to me and they say, oh yes, I bought this card and this card and this card to send to a friend, but I like them too much, so I couldn't send them, I've still got them. And I hear that a lot. People buy stuff and they just can't part with it, which I think is kind of good.
So with the memories that you're hoping people to take away by buying these souvenirs, is it about the history, it's about the look, it's about the texture?
Well, a lot of the times when people are drawn to these sorts of images, it's because they had fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers that were doing the same kind of work at the same kind of time. And they've wondered also what were things like, what were conditions like. And sometimes, you pick up a picture and you wonder, could this have been someone I was related to? So it's only been in the last year that I saw a picture of my great-grandfather who died in the mine, because at the Family History Centre they've got some of the old, I don't know what you call them, ID photos. I think in the 1930s there was like a whole lot of photos that were taken of individual employees, and he just happened to have been one of the ones that were on file. And apart from that one, which was a few months earlier, that was the only time I'd ever seen a photograph of what he looked like. So when I was initially working on these things, because it was way before that, I'd often think of these people that he would have worked with, or these people that he would have known.
And you've had opportunities to also kind of promote Broken Hill in Sydney. You mentioned before, like, you've had some work sold through the Powerhouse Museum shops.
I've got in different news agencies and bookshops at different times. And earlier on, I had stuff at the Powerhouse Museum, but that's closed at the moment.
Yeah.
Pardon me. And because one of the things I've noticed is wherever you go in Australia, Broken Hill is one of those places that even if people have not been here, they've got a concept of it. So whether it's through film, through history, through having come to Broken Hill on a school excursion when they were school camp when they were young, everybody has a concept of what Broken Hill is. So when they see something, it kind of like reinforces sometimes that image that they've got at Broken Hill.
So you are selling Broken Hill souvenirs in Sydney?
Yeah, because I have these as well, because these don't necessarily need to be a souvenir. People write cards, they send these sorts of cards, and I also have a lot of Christmas cards as well, and I've got a lot of Broken Hill specific Christmas cards that I'll also have there, because there's a lot of people who are in Sydney that have a family connection to Broken Hill, a family historical connection to Broken Hill as well. So, yeah.
So if people wanted to buy your cards or the things that you sell, where can they find it locally?
There different people around town sell different things. So the Palace Hotel has some of the ceramic trivets, has some coasters, some cards, and the fan and the tea towels. The Art Gallery gift shop has the tea towels and some cards. The Visitor Information Centre has stickers and some cards. The Barrier Stationers has some coasters and some cards. Ferries has some mouse pads, some cards and some coasters. Charlotte's has some cards as well. Off the top of my head.
Is this a full-time gig for you?
It definitely is, because some of these images, it takes months to finish. Because when I'm editing these things, some of these ones I've done it at 1,000% because of needing to get like the lines and bring out things like, sometimes when you see these things in black and white, you don't even know half the stuff that's there until you bring it out and you bring it out and you bring it out. And also some of the pictures that I was choosing when I was first doing this, I chose the ones that had, the cracked negatives, or that had lines all the way through it, so that I would be using images that people wouldn't have seen in other places. And that does take a long time to get through.
Like, is it enough to put food in your belly and a house over your head?
No, what I find is that it's enough for the next lot of work that needs to be done. It kind of like perpetuates itself, but it's not. I'm not ready to retire yet. No. So it kind of like sustains itself in terms of the costs associated with what is required of it.
Yeah.
But because of the fact, you're doing something that's only ever going to sell a certain amount, it's not like your one image is going to be the answer to all of your financial things. Like some of these, like not a lot of them get sold, but what I get out of it is the ones that do so have a strong connection to the people who are buying them.
Well, it's been so lovely to chat to you and get to know you, Jaddan. And do you see this as an art for you?
It definitely is. I mean, all forms of communication are, in a way, artistic, and this is my way of communicating, my history, my experiences, and my perception of them as well. I mean, nobody else is going to see these sorts of things the way I see them. So and it's an ongoing thing, I think, something that you can always come back to.
So much of our world today is digital, but in the future, I guess the items that you are creating will be these physical things that people will have. You know, when we look back and think about how we lived, or maybe people in the future will think, how did they live, and what were the things that they had in their homes and their lives, and it will be some of the things perhaps that you've created that they still have value, the things that we create and physically touch and not just online things.
Yeah, no, there's definitely something tangible about being able to hold these things and see what life was like at that time through something tangible.
Well, Jaddan, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a privilege to meet you.
No worries, thank you very much. Thanks.